evening. Sorry it took us a little while. I guess we were having too much fun at the reception, so we didn't get over here. I wanted to welcome all of you. My name is Alessandra Moctezuma, and I'm gallery director here at San Diego Mesa College. I'm also a professor of museum studies, and also I teach Chicano studies. I teach the class of Chicano art. And I want to first of all thank all of the members of our museum studies class that help us put together the exhibitions. They worked really hard to put up these installations, and it's thanks to them that we can change from one exhibit to another in 1.5 weeks. So I want to thank all of you students who are here. And especially those who are here, Jenny Armour, who does all of our graphics and held those 55-pound panels, all 2,000 pounds of that fence, helped put that up. Pat Vine is our gallery coordinator, wonderful. You know, she helps us with everything. I don't know if Jacqueline Sarvis or Orisa Baru are here, but also all of our students. So, several years ago, I came across the work of Paul Torounet, and I also had seen pieces by Maria Teresa Fernandez at City College, and I knew also of the work of Carmela Castrejon because of the Border Arts workshop. And one of the things that interests me, that I think we should have a dialogue about, is the fact that San Diego and Tijuana are sisters cities, but they're separated by this impenetrable wall. And it is something that touches the lives of many of us. I have a older sister, and my brother-in-law travels across the border every day to work. And I know people who travel over here from Tijuana also to work. I know families that have been separated by the border. I myself came here as an immigrant when I was 14 years old, and for 6 years until I got my residency, I could not travel to Mexico. And so very personally, I also felt that. Even though we are next to Tijuana, and there is that shift as you cross into Mexico in terms of the landscape, the environment, the people, the culture. Many of us have never been to the border fence. I've hiked out to Border Park, Friendship Park, several times, but I know many of my students that have never seen it. And the images that they saw in the gallery, this was the first time they encountered it. And this is the reason why I wanted to bring these artists here today. They all work with photographic images, but they all have unique perspectives. They deal with those images in very different ways. And they also have their own interesting stories of how they gather those images and what they represent to them. And so I was trying, and Maria Teresa mentioned this to me, it's like a musical symphony. It's like playing on different themes, you know, playing on different riffs, but dealing with a similar topic. So I think that having a dialogue and having the artists present to us would clarify some of this. Without any further ado, I will call the artists to come up and speak one by one, and then we could also have a more informal dialogue, or we could also open it up for questions from the audience. So thanks again for joining us tonight. And the first person to come up will be Carmela Castrejon.
I too want to thank Mesa College and the crew that installed the show, Pat, Alessandra, and everyone that was involved in this exhibit. Thank you very much. I am. This theme of the border is like a very personal one from many perspectives. One is the fact that I am from Tijuana, and I grew up, my first home was on 2nd Street, half a block from Revolucion. So Tijuana has always seemed to me to have this like characteristic of being a little bit surreal, or has some surreal elements. And this, one of these surreal elements was that fence, especially the character that it has now. And before it wasn't such a like an offensive and you know, overpowering, at least visually. It was like at some points along the border you could see just cable dividing it, or maybe chain link fence. But still, this chain link fence would go a little bit into, not the ocean, but yes, into the sand. One of the photos, and I'm sorry I don't have that as a reference here, but one of the works that I have in the show is a small piece which is called North, South, East, West. And there you can see, you know, that fence, and people in the afternoon waiting for the sun to go down so that they could cross into the U.S. It's been quite an interesting process to see how it went from a chain link fence to, you know, this monumental steel wall with another one next to it, and then taller, and then another one. How many fences can we build, you know? First, the inoffensive aspect of it was, you know, it's a chain link fence like you put around your yard to, you know, so that you can divide your property from your neighbors. But here, there's a wall where there's like little holes, if you know, where you can see to the other side. I'm glad there's some little holes there, because at least you can see parts of San Diego, you know, maybe the sky. Okay, so that's my relationship to like this wall. I really like this image. I'm going to start talking a little bit about this. I love like not the perspective, but like the proportion of it. You have this little like small child against this tall, cold, rusty fence, and she's very, you know, she's very like innocent, with other children coming into the photograph. In the late 80s, that's when I began to photograph the fence, because besides the fact that it was a fence going into the sand, there was some structures that looked kind of like jacks, you know, the games that you play with a ball, and that was the surreal element for me, you know, the jacks. I guess these structures were there maybe to make some kind of, they were testing probably the sand and the movement of objects there. So that's when I began to photograph the fence. During that time also, in Tijuana, there was this artist community that had no gallery to show in. San Diego, you know, there was connections with artists in San Diego, but still not too many galleries. There was like Installation Gallery, I remember. The Rus, which was like a performance space. So we as artists began to have shows in the streets. This is Plaza Santa Cecilia, which is actually half a block away from where I you learn how to skate and ride my bicycle. This is downtown Tijuana. You can go to this plaza. It's right next to Revolucion, where the big like arch, the big clock is. So we would orchestrate events, organize events that involve theater, music, performances, and they all had to do with, you know, they all had like a political content to them. Again, this is the downtown area. You know, here's a protest. I don't remember what it was about, but you know, some of the artists would get involved in making like paintings or like the body that's like in front of the truck. Performances at Casa de la Cultura, which were, you know, like independently organized, and it wasn't so much of a welcoming space for artists, but we, you know, we made our presence felt there. This brought us, okay, this is a Bordo. This is actually like where the crosses are. It's kind of like it's at the border, and where the crosses are, it's kind of it's where there's the division of Tijuana and San Diego. During this time, the U.S. or San Diego had this incredible campaign of, you know, demonizing immigrants, undocumented people. And what it was, and looking at it in retrospect, what it was the beginning of the fence, of the building of this fence. There was a group called, a group called Light Up the Border, right? Okay, and what this group did was they were the ones sort of like in charge of bringing attention to or lobbying to you know, to get the fence built. What happened here is they would once a month they would line up in a road near the border. What you see in the background is Tijuana, where the dog is. That's where the people from Light Up the Border would park their cars, and when night came, they would turn their lights on, and symbolically and also physically lighting up the border so that the border patrol can see, you know, the people that were crossing the border undocumented. This is the time when we had the chain link fence, and they were, you know, partly responsible of pushing, you know, the political agendas so that this fence that we have there is would take place. So here you have, on the other side, you have the community of activists and artists and people, you know, that are interested in what's happening, you know. What we wanted, I don't have pictures of the first action that took place, but what people did was hold mirrors or reflective surfaces so that the light would shine back on the people that were lighting up the road. This is the second like intervention that took place, and what we wanted was to establish a dialogue. You know, it was like a monologue. They were getting all the coverage, but the people on the other side, the ones holding the signs, they were not being given a voice. They were not being given time in the media. So this was our way of, you know, establishing a dialogue, or trying to establish a dialogue, and which, from our point of view, is what needed to happen. The people on that side, the one was with the signs, like I said, are activists, but there's also a community of artists that are involved and on both sides of the border. So this was like a binational kind of effort. Artists, like Lisandra said earlier, there's this border, but I have lived this. I can tell you firsthand that border has never stopped artists talking or working with each other. It's really funny for me, because all these like binational projects, somebody discovers the golden thread, right? An institution now has a binational project. Please, binational projects have always taken place. Artists, communities have always developed work together, as we were doing then. This will be like a series. Again, more media, demonizing undocumented people. We were, we carry diseases, we are terrorists, we are drug smugglers. The places where people cross are full of criminals. And we said no, and we, meaning the Border Art Workshop, this is some of the work that I was involved in with the Border Art Workshop. We would go to the communities, this was called the soccer field, bring material, create props, develop a performance, and when people would walk into the US, when the sun was coming down, then that's when we would develop the performance. So it involved the community, it involved kids, it involved adults. These were not criminals, these were just regular people that live in a colonia, in an area that happens to be close to the border, that happens to be where they play soccer, and a place where people walk into the canyons to go into the US, or was actually. Here's a series of performances that we did, again with the Border Art Workshop. It was called Border Sutures, and what we did was we started our travels in Brownsville, and we zigzagged our way across the border, north-south, north-south. And we saw the border as an open wound that needed to be healed. So border sutures meant that we did a series of performances putting staples down along the border. Some staples were like this one was made out of metal, others wood, others floated down the river. And luckily, when one is there, things happen, We would find the border, look for places along the border. There were usually people, migrants, waiting to cross or just hanging out, and they would help us with this series of staples that we laid along the border. Performance that we did in Laredo, I think. Kids were involved. I don't have an image of the wrestlers. There were a couple of wrestlers' masks. So here was the Migra, the Border Patrol, against the undocumented workers. More about that stuff. A series of stories. We were questioning with this project you are a native Californian? Okay, go back to your house, interview your family, and figure out when somebody came over, because you're not a native Californian. If you are not indigenous, then you're not a native Californian. Somewhere down the line, somebody had to cross a river, not a river, actually an ocean to get here. Maybe a river too. This is not about tough stuff, but this is the beginning, the first fence that they built. This is in '93, and we made a sign calling it outside which was a reference to the Insights, Insight 92, which was one of the initial like insights that gave way to the bigger and more international insights. So here we have it outside 93. It was in 93, and here's this site, this installation being developed, right? The platform to put in the tubes that would make the fence. And well, we took some chairs and we were watching people working, and then at some point we applauded their efforts. Their performance, actually. Here's our, because I pay taxes here too, our tax dollars at work, the trucks, and then in the background you have Tijuana and the fence numbered, so that everybody knows we're very big on location, right? So you don't have to use your GPS to find panel 729. This is what they do, tear down, move mountains, so that the Border Patrol cars can move freely along the secure area with your friendly neighbor country. It's a tripod, no.
Triptych.
Oh, triptych, yeah. It's a tri thing, okay. It's a triptych, just some images that have been, that I took along the border. Again, this is, some of the work that has been taking place in the last few years to create that federal highway, more of the border, a wonderful fence. I don't know, I never imagined, can this be real, somebody dividing up an ocean? Yeah, it is, it's very surreal too. I think I have more photos of the border, but I think what was more important of the images that I have is the black and white stuff, the the prehistoric times of of no fence. So I think I'm gonna leave it here because I don't want to repeat images. You've seen plenty of images inside the gallery. Okay.
Thank you so much, Carmela. That was really fascinating. I had never seen such a great collection of images of Border Arts Workshop. I'd seen the pictures that are in the books, and I have some friends who participated, but you really gave a sense of the activists, artists that were working. And Carmela shows how, yes, this border is a place where there's this economic exchange or interactions. There's people that cross, but there's also artists that are actively also doing things to counter that division. So now I want to invite Maria Teresa Fernandez, who has also documented the border, and she has other stories to tell us. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. And I really appreciate your invitation, Alessandra. And for me to speak in public has been always something very, very, it has always been very, very hard. So one of the things that I found late in my life is the camera. My camera is helping me to express myself. It's, I think, there's people that have ability to express with words, spoken words. There's people that they speak with written words. There's dancers that express themselves with their body. I run, but that's not. But I found that the camera is helping me to express myself right now. As you can see, because of my heavy accent, I'm originally from Mexico. I came here at the time that the border was being built in 91, but I didn't pay attention to that because at that time I was more into trying to be an artist, full-time artist, molding or sculpting the soul of my 4 children. Later, I took some class. My background is art history, but I took some classes here at Mesa College about museum studies, and then I went to UCSD to work in the gallery as a curator assistant, and they gave me the job of cataloging the photos of Tina Modotti, an international conference that was going to be held over there. And I realized that I didn't know anything about photography. I mean, the technical aspect of photography, I decided to take classes of photography. And since I started, my eyes turned to Tijuana. And I started with a project about the houses built with discarded materials. And looking for these houses, I always found that these neighborhoods couldn't grow to the north. Always there was something that was stopping them. So I started being very, very interested what was that object. And I realized that that object was alive, that was moving from one side to another of the city, that all of a sudden it was not just moving, but it was growing in height and length, and it was reproducing, so it's alive. And I really started my relationship with that object, and I saw that there was, here is growing, it is one of the canyons, and I started walking all along the border in order to know more about that object. I started to read about it, the history of that object, and I saw the construction and the reconstruction of that fence, and I started documenting. And all of a sudden I saw that these photos that I was taking, I had to share them. It was something that I was keeping for myself because it was like a project for my photography class. And all of a sudden I said, well, I'm witnessing something that is kind of selfish to keep it for myself. And that's when I started to share. And one of the things that really attracted me to were that this object was used as a canvas for the artists, for the activists, for the people that lived close to the border, for the people from Tijuana, and not just for the people. There were people coming from the central part of Mexico to express their feelings on the fence. Here is one of the installations, and you can see that how they were changing. This installation was by Border Art Workshop, Michael Schnorr, and I started to realize that these activists were working on the fence in certain times of the year. It was on October. It was when Gatekeeper started in '94. So every year they wanted to express against that program with some installations. The Day of the Dead too, they were putting some installations of altars on the fence. It's Michael Schnorr who was working very, very hard. The gallon has become an icon for to represent the migrants. Here is you can see that is part of my work to follow the installations, to see how they were there and how they are destroyed by nature or by the same people. So my images are helping a little bit to make them alive, to keep them alive. And it's not just the activists, to the same migrants leave their messages there. It's like the men when they arrive in the moon, what they did, they put the banner of the United States. So when you go to a touristic place or some place, you write your name, or I'm from Mexico. And just following all the graffiti of the migrants, I can make a map and sign, and symbol with all the places they come from. And so the graffiti. I mean, the same migrants make graffitis on the fences. There's a church. It's another graffiti on the fence, and these are some of the few ones that are in the American side, because you cannot touch the fence in the American side. It's the company that makes the fence. This is a new one in Playas. It just recently it was made a week ago. So that's I'm trying to document everything that's happening there, you know, and to make some kind of to keep them alive, because they disappear. This graffiti was installed, and before that there were another graffiti. At the time that the fence was a little bit open, the children could go from one place to another. And here some of the children in Colonia Libertad, some of the with pieces of tear gas that the Border Patrol threw to them, because there were some migrants trying to cross. And as objects, it's another of the themes that I have in my. The other one is, I call it the skin of the border fence, which is just close-ups. And there's another of the themes that I trying to follow is the security, is how they build the towers with the TV cameras and sensors. And here they are installing the concertina in order to make it more difficult for the migrants to cross. Here they use the tires to erase the footprints of the migrants in order to come again later on and to see if they have passed again. Here's some of the migrants looking through the fence, and here are some of them trying to cross. And here the ones trying using the chango, which is the ladder that they make very flexible, you know, when they try to cross, they get arrested, and then they get deported. This is one of the encampments of the migrants. It is in 91. And in 71, Pat Nixon declared Friendship Park kind of a place to gather. And she said that she hoped not to have a fence in that place. And his Friendship Park with a fence. Then Watman trying to work in a binational garden. Right now, the binational garden is a reality. There were events before with salsa classes, and in both sides of the communion. It was when the fence was open, a little bit more open. The families could gather there and have picnics. It was a very, very touching moment. Carlos is a guide who crossed the border illegally 7 years ago, and he hadn't had the opportunity to see his mother. His mother came from the central part of Mexico, and the Border Patrol allowed her to cross, and it was the moment that they met. It's one of the fathers with them. Then they decided to close Friendship Park, that beautiful place where people could get together and touch themselves. And there is one march that protesting against the closing of the Friendship Park. Save Friendship Park. Here are some of the Border Patrols. The first day that they stopped people approaching to the fence. There's some activists trying to stop that moment, and here is at the moment that they are installing the last part of the secondary fence. It's when there is a Friendship Park, and there's a group of activists that they were fighting in order to maintain Friendship Park open. Border Patrol decided to open again, but with a kind of a corral. And so they couldn't touch, they couldn't pass anything. And that's the way they started to see their families, through that kind of a friendship circle. That's what they call it. We call it corral. The activities continue, even though they were not possible to be close to the fence. Then they decided to construct and reconstruct the whole site. the new fence at Friendship Park, and this is how it looks right now. They can be together, they can touch, but not really. I mean, they can touch just the tip of their fingers. That's how it looks, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. It's Jocumba. People and activists are trying to tear it down with words, with activities, with the desire of not having that fence. These are some of the ministers that go every Sunday to give to share the bread with people who are in Tijuana. There are activists, artists that are trying to express their feelings on the fence, trying to tear it in some way or to erase it. The migrants keep waiting there, waiting for the moment to cross. But there is one thing that every time that I see the border, I see the birds, I think evolution hasn't been fair to us. We can swim. We can learn how to swim, but we cannot learn how to fly. And what would be of the fences if we humans could fly?
Thank you so much, Maria Teresa. And maybe also later we could ask you a little bit of what is happening in Friendship Park and how people, if they want, could get involved. So Maria Teresa gave us this other perspective. I was just thinking when I was in the gallery space how it looks very much like the lighting and everything, like a place of worship. And then I was thinking, why does it have that feeling to it? And one of it, I think Carmela's works are almost like these reliquaries, you know, they are made out of these objects, and are made precious also by the images. And then I was looking at Maria Teresa's photographs and the compositions, and I thought they almost look like a stained glass, you know, set of windows with the colors, and the content is so, you know, is powerful. But I also feel that we've created this space, this installation, this architectural, you know, place. And then Paul's work too with that fence, you know, if that fence could talk, that's, you know, that's the actual, you know, fence that he's going to tell us about. But next, I'm going to invite Paul, and I have to say, you know, both the Maria Teresa and Paul were so involved in the installation here with us, I think every day for the last week, living here.
Pretty much.
And I have to say, Paul, when he approached me with the idea of his installation, I said, yes, let's do it. And then when he told me how much those panels weighed, I was
You were nervous.
nervous. And I think I stayed up, like that first night we had it all up. And I hoped that the next day the gallery would still be standing. And it's still there, and I am so glad that, you know, that we did it. So now Paul's going to tell us a little bit about his work and the story about his project. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, you guys, for hanging in there. My name is Paul Torounet. I want to thank Alessandra and Pat for facilitating this. I want to thank Jenny Armour for helping me lift 2,000 pounds of steel for a couple days. It was really cool. I'm going to show you what inspired the work. My history and relationship to the border is very different than these guys. As you can see, I don't live in Tijuana. I'm not from Mexico. But the border has a very personal place for me as well. And I was a Fulbright Fellow in 1997 and 98, and that's where my first relationship with the border started. And it was very different work. I photographed in color. I traveled the entire border from Matamoros to Tijuana for an entire year on the government's dime, no less, which was really cool. And just seeing what daily life was like. And then when I returned, I made a photograph of this guy. And this is down down at Pius and Tijuana at Friendship Park. And I was just making pictures. And I saw this guy, and he was getting ready to climb over this fence, which is next to the border wall. And I said, "Oh, hold on." And I was shooting with a large format camera. And I said, I made a photograph of him. And when I was in, during my Fulbright time, I was living in Matamoros, and my grandmother passed away. So I flew home for the funeral, and when we went to where she lived, my dad asked me what did I want of her possessions, which I thought was kind of odd. And she had a tintype of my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather when they immigrated from France to the United States. And it was that first marker of my family history. And I was really curious about this little thing, and I became interested in the idea of could I replicate something like that. And so I did a test print on a piece of steel, utilizing a liquid light material. And it was really cool, but it was really tedious. I didn't know what I was doing. And I showed it to, I was at the time teaching at the University of San Diego, and I showed it to a religious studies professor who was running an organization called the Transborder Institute. And he says, "Do you know what you've created?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a picture on steel." And he goes, "No, it's not. It's a retablo. You should go do some research. And when you're done doing some research, you come back to me, and why don't you do a grant application? We might be able to give you some money to do some more stuff. But you need to go do some homework first." So I went and did my homework, and I became very interested in the notion of the retablo. And for those that don't know, a retablo is a votive offering. And it's basically, it's a painting on tin, light gauge steel. And as you can see, it's an offering to a religious offering to give thanks for being delivered through a miraculous situation. And so I started thinking about this idea of the retablo. And so I took the photograph. Let's see, I don't have this. Maybe the sound. And so I took that first photograph and I printed it on a 16 by 20 inch, eighth inch piece of steel. It was about a, 40-pound photograph. It was done in a dark room, all by hand. And I had this crazy idea of, well, I should go put it on the wall where I made the photograph. And so I would put this on a motorcycle, all my tools, this 30-pound steel plate, my camera gear. I'd drive down to the border, and I would drill holes into the wall. And this was the first time I had ever done this, and I had no idea what I was doing. And somebody said, "Well, did you ask for permission?" I'm like, who am I supposed to ask? I'm on the Mexican side. This isn't their wall. And the U.S. guys, I'm in Mexico. They're not going to really care. But the first time I did this, I'm like really nervous. So I was constantly looking through these little peepholes to look into the United States, and there was a Border Patrol guy on the other side. And it was okay. It was comfortable. And then as I got this thing installed, I would pop rivet it on. A Tijuana police cruiser shows up. "Oh, what are you doing?" "My Spanish is awful." I said, "Well, that's mine." He said, "It's really beautiful." And then they drove away. They said, "Just keep doing what you're doing." So it was like this really surreal, odd experience. I'll advance along. So I started doing more of them. And so this is one just above Smuggler's Gulch. Maria Teresa had a photograph where you saw him filling in that big canyon. And so this is right above it. And so the step ladder, the rocks piled up, that was already there. The migrants had put that there. And then I improvised and made photographs that reflected the idea of me crossing. And then I would make photographs documenting. I also did videos as well, so as to give a real true sense of the context. So this is, I'm going to turn this down. So this is a video of It's in the gallery. It's the one where there's the three guys and they're living in this real narrow area. And this was a nasty area because, and I like to work alone. I don't like to have anybody with me. I carry, it was a large format camera. I had a tripod. I had a lot of gear with me. So I'd go walking into these places. And as you can see, it's really narrow. And so when I would come upon these situations, it was kind of a surprise. Surprise for me of who I would see, and clearly a surprise for them, because they could not figure out why this guy, me, would be in this place. And I would carry around a small portfolio of photographs. I was shooting Polaroids. So it was a positive negative. And it was intentional. I wanted it to be a collaboration. And the photographs that you see in the gallery, they're portraits. And they're intentional portraits in that I wanted the viewer to be looking at the person I was photographing. I wanted that direct contact. I looked at a lot of photography of the border and how it had been done. I even printed for a photographer, pretty well-known documentary photographer. And all of the images tended to be of migrants either being intercepted by the Border Patrol. You'd see their backs. And frankly, I wasn't particularly interested in that kind of dialogue. I wanted it to be a more personal dialogue. I wanted people to be able to see the face. And with this group, the notion of site-specific was important because I liked the dialogue of, the only people that saw this were migrants themselves. That was it. And me, because I'd go down there and check out my work all the time. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. Right? It's interesting. So when I did this one and I went to install it, you can see it's burned out. And so these guys were gone. And when I went to this place to do the original installation, I didn't do the video at the time. I had a knife pulled on me. And when I opened up the box, they're like, oh, okay, it's all good. Right? What's interesting about this one is it eventually burned and the image deteriorated away. So this is another one where in the gallery you see there's 4 of them, but it was actually a 5-panel one. It's even higher up. And this was actually the last one I did. So there were, with the site-specific work, there was 5 installation sites, a total of 11 plates. And what's interesting is that over the course of time, these things deteriorated. What was really, and this was an unexpected thing. I had no idea what to expect when I would install these and print them, how long they would last, what would change. And what happened is the images, they would start to deteriorate. And as time grew, and I have some of these now, I took them back down because they're really quite beautiful as objects themselves. And this is the one that burned. And what's interesting is that none of the plates were ever taken down. They would always stay intact. What's interesting is how the Mexican government came along and they put up their own retablo, right? As a warning sign. And what's interesting with this set, you notice that with each person I photographed, I would get their name and I'd get the state they were from. At some point in time, the stories of why they were crossing became kind of consistent. And while they're interesting, I was most interested in just their identity. Identity by the first name and where they're from. So with these 5, they had carved their name in the state, and then you can see how they deteriorated and even got tagged. So there's the installation in the gallery is 42 feet long by pretty much 10 feet high. One section is 12 feet high. Each panel weighs roughly 55 pounds. So there's 2,200 pounds of steel on Alessandra's wall. So when we had it on the floor like this is the moment she walked in. And she's looking at it, and I could see she was a little puzzled. She's all, so is my wall going to fall down? I said, I don't think so. I think we'll be okay. This is the first time I've installed it like this. So you have to be confident, right? You don't want to let the gallery director know that I have no idea what's going to happen. We'll find out tomorrow, all right? So, and I do. It was a pleasure to work with a former student, Jenny Armour. This was quite a task because of the sheer weight of it and the building of it. I literally built a wall. So when the wall went up, we had to put these braces up, and that's what the wall's actually supported to. So frankly, if you all want to climb on it when I take the photographs down, you want to do some aerobic exercises or something, knock yourself out. And this is when the wall finally got put up, and then this is what the photographs on there. And then you can see I've added some dirt finishing touch. The project got expanded from the site-specific to a gallery installation because I didn't go promoting my work that was site-specific. I was doing this for myself. And I think for those students that are in the room, I think you come to a point of why are you making your work and what are you doing? And in the end, I hope it's because it's something you feel you need to do and you want to do. Not something that you feel you have to do or being told to do. But that there's something internal inside that says, I need to do this. And that's why I did this. But this was in 2004 where the migrant experience had become quite an explosion. It expanded into the desert, Sonora Desert with Arizona. So I expanded the project to go out there. And while I was out there, they were averaging a death a day in the summertime. I have a couple of personal narratives in there. I found a migrant, and so there's one of the narratives deals with what that whole experience was like. And the text is a Border Patrol agent told me what eventually happened. There's another personal narrative that talks about what it was just like being out on the line. And then the photographs were, to be more expansive. And at that point in time, with the number of pictures I had made, the volume of what was taking place, I thought it was important to bring it into a different setting. And in 2006, when they were tearing down the wall, it's interesting because Maria Teresa's probably on the other side making her photographs, and then there's this crazy gringo guy throwing pieces of border wall into a truck. Right, because there was an opportunity that, and you can see it in some of her photographs, that it was a Marine Corps unit that was tearing it down. They were doing the demo work. And so when I went down there to inquire about it, nobody knew whose responsibility it was. So nobody was taking ownership of it. And I said, I'll take ownership of it. And they said, well, we're only down here one more day, so you better come down here tomorrow. So I got home, I rented a truck, I drove down, and I threw as much of this stuff into the truck as I could. I've never worked so fast in my life. I was exhausted. So, because people say, well, how'd you get it? Yeah, I say I salvaged it. But that's a nice, kind way of saying I stole it. So, I think now's a good time for questions and answers, yeah? Thank you.
All of you want to come up here and then open it up in general?
Yeah, I'll put this. Okay, who's going to be brave?
We have good students here that have lots of questions, right? Here.
In an emotional sense, seem to get harder, like emotionally for you?
For me, yes. I go there once or twice a week. And every time that I go to Friendship Park, it's getting harder and harder. I come home and my husband asked what was going on today, and I keep telling him the stories that I hear every Sunday of the separation of the families. And it's every time it's harder and harder and harder because I cannot do anything. And they tell me their stories and how they were separated and how they are just touching each other. There is a girl that goes there with her baby, and I was caressing the cheek of the baby, and the father who was in the other side told me, I wish I could do that. That's kind of...
Well, for me, the work, I made the work from 2002 through 2006. For me, it was particularly hard after 2004 when I was out in the desert. There's a photograph of a bra that's out in the middle of the desert. I was seeing children. I went to, and it's in the personal narrative, where there's this arroyo with a bunch of clothes in it. And that time I did go out with Grupos Beta. And it was a place where people were robbed and women were raped. And it got to a point where, what you see out there and what people are trying to do, it's hard to see. But it's also important to document it and show it. And for me to then try to transform the work into something else, so that it's not just about a documentation, but that it will draw people in to start to, hopefully, the idea, my intentions with the work were to put a face on the experience and to show it in some different contexts and perspectives. So I think this experience of being on the border for all of us, you can see it's very personal. There's a longevity to it. It's a lived experience. None of us came and went. So, yeah. I think you compartmentalize it too.
Where did you guys meet? Where did you...
It's all Alessandra's fault.
Yes, that's what a curator does. They find artists that maybe have things that connect them, and that's what I did. I met Maria Teresa because I saw her work at City College and other venues where she had been documenting the border. Carmela's work I knew because of the Border Arts Workshop, and maybe I also saw it at the museum. And then Paul approached me several years ago with his work, and that's when I thought that their work, in terms of the content, they were both all dealing with the border, but in very different ways. So yeah. So they met because of this project, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
There was
no, I met Maria Teresa.
You and I have met.
I'm gonna sit here.
Yeah.
I met Maria Teresa at the border. Different installations, and just taking a stroll along the fence.
It's more for Paul. Do you shoot with Polaroid and then shoot with the large format, or do you just make the big prints from Polaroid?
It's a large, just Polaroid camera, pack film, and the intention there was, and I did that right from the get-go. Once I had done that first one, I was interested in the positive-negative aspect of it. And after that first one, I started giving the actual print. This is a day when Polaroid made positive-negative. So I would give the positive to the person I was photographing. And it was a collaborative thing. And, most photographers like to take more than one. So, right? So I would shoot one, and if it was good, and I was keeping all the negatives, so that was good. But I would always shoot a second or a third. Give them. So, and what was nice is, for people crossing it, it's not like they were carrying a lot of things. And the reason, you'll notice that all the photographs are made in stark daylight. That one's made at night. And that was intentional as well, because you don't see photographs of migrants during the day, unless they're sleeping. That was interesting. So, and it's a very psychological moment, because they're stuck there, and they're having to wait for nightfall to be able to cross. And so when you look at their face, when you look at their eyes, you're tapping into a moment of anxiety, uncertainty, that something's being left behind in anticipation of something else, and they're complete unknowns. And I was really interested in that psychological space, because that space alone is important, besides the physical thing. The physical thing is, it's a landscape, and it's frankly a beautiful thing, out in the desert at the very least. But I was really interested in that psychological force. So that's why the process.
With this specific interest that you had in mind, how were you able to, or how did you approach people that you photographed? How was that easy for you, or how did you go about that?
I would just walk around, and I'd find people, and they would find me, and that would be a really weird, awkward moment. Because it's an unknown for both of us, both groups. People would think I was a DEA agent or an undercover Border Patrol agent trying to figure out where all the migrants were hiding. When I crossed back into the United States, I'd be asked, why were you there? What were you doing? Where are the migrants? Well, they're over there somewhere. The migrants would go, well, where are the Border Patrol? Well, they're over there. The guy right there, so don't want to know that, So it was pretty much very solo and independent, with the exception of a couple times where I went out with group perspective, which was frankly the only way to get access to that part of the borders. You guys got anything you want to add?
I forgot what the question was.
How you approach people.
The reason I'm asking you is because I did a backpacking trip to South America, and approaching people, and for me, myself being bilingual, people weren't very comfortable with that. And it's an open space, open area, and you're talking about the psychological moment that these immigrants are facing. So I was just wondering, how, it must have been more intense for you, and just wondering more of the techniques that you approached. And
Like I said, my Spanish is awful. I don't dress like this, obviously. I actually look, when I was out photographing, I look pretty rough. I smile, and I try to use pictures as an entry. And I think when somebody, especially what I did notice is when I would give the photograph to the person, it was an important possession, because it was documenting this really important moment in their life. And it's not like they were carrying around a lot of things. Maybe some family photographs, maybe one or two, some money, very basic essentials. So this is it was an important possession. And I think that exchange was really interesting. I think when I did the sites, particularly with the site-specific work, one of the videos, I didn't show it, I rode my motorcycle up the hill with all this junk on the back to install these plates. And there was no place to park the bike, so I had to dump the bike. And the Border Patrol could see me. And all I could think is, he's on his radio laughing at me, telling all his buddies. A group of migrants came up out of this little canyon. They're looking at me and kind of smiling. And they're going, look at the idiot gringo. And all I can think about is my motorcycle. It's my only way to get back across with all this stuff. And so I got my motorcycle down the hill. I shoot with a Leica. I had my large format. I had the University of San Diego's $3,000 video camera. And I left it all at the top of the hill. And when I got the motorcycle at the bottom, these guys are carrying all that stuff down to the bottom of the hill. I felt really bad. I said, no, we have to go back up the hill. And they hauled it all back up the hill. And they still didn't know why I was there. And when we got into the little canyon, I opened up the little box with the plates, and it was like their eyes, they got wider. And they helped me install the plates, and they watched my motorcycle, because there was a Smuggler Gulch, and a lot of drug running through there. And when I got back to the University of San Diego, I was talking to a colleague, told her the whole story. And she's all, I mean, you left all that stuff at the top of the hill. What's wrong with you? Weren't you worried about it being stolen? And it never dawned on me. Probably stupidity, because all I cared about was my motorcycle. But I relate the story because it speaks, and even to this day, it still speaks about, there's good people and bad people. And on the border, and crossing all that chance. But it really spoke about a level of humanity that even in their most desperate moment, they would still do something for somebody else. Somebody like me. And they had no idea what they cared. So, when you ask the question of, how do you approach people? And if you are interested in photography and you're going to photograph people, I don't think you approach them as a photographer. You approach them as a person. And you treat them as you would want to be treated. It's that old adage. And I think that speaks a lot. And I think when you look at the work of all of us, it suggests that. Other questions?
No, I wanted to add to that.
Oh, okay.
The last words, that Paul just said, that's kind of like the humane way to treat a person. But also because they are in that psychological space, some people will just look away. They don't want to deal with anything. They have enough baggage. But some appreciate the fact that somebody is like paying attention to them when you're in such a lonely and desolate and scary moment in your life, and somebody is thinking about them and is trying to do something, and to be there. So you get different experiences.
Yeah, I actually had to live in Tijuana for a while, and I noticed that in Tijuana, the city's right up against the fence,
Right.
and they have this kind of constant engagement with the fence. I lived at the Postal area, and I had a beautiful view of the ocean in the distance in San Diego, and then the fence right there. If you're going to the airport, you would run into the fence. You go to the beach, you're going down the Via, you look at the fence. And San Diegans are removed from it seems like, there's very little interaction on the San Diegan side. So, how, first of all, it feels very monumental. I thought your description of it as an animal growing was very beautiful. And how does it become the character that it is in Tijuana in San Diego?
There's a buffer zone, a military strategy buffer zone.
Right.
San Isidro was there, it's probably the only community that's close up, right? That's touching. And it was thought about to create this, this zone where there's no development taking place. So it's a military strategy, even prior to the fence,
Yeah, that's locally. If you were to go to Nogales, there's two. They're right up on top of each other. You go to Juarez and El Paso, same thing.
Right.
Agua Prieta in Douglas, Arizona. Naco, there's a Naco, Sonora and a Naco, Arizona. Once it hits San Luis, there's a little bit of a community on the Arizona side, but that's where, you know, and Mexicali and
There's a space also.
yeah, and even what's really curious, it's curious to see it here, right? It's curious to see it along the Rio Grande, where there is a buffer zone with a natural border. They've created this buffer zone. So, can there ever be one? Probably not at this stage, not for a while.
Probably what's happened also is like Nogales in 1848, the city got split up.
Yeah.
Tijuana is a young city. Mexicali is a young city. It grew after, you know, or established itself after 1848, right? When that part of the Mexican territory was, you know, became part of the U.S.
That part, the buffer of the no man's land was created here in San Diego, Tijuana in 2009. It's when they, and it's, for San Diegans, it's too close, too far.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you know, that like you're showing us a view that when we hear them talk about immigration, they talk about the fence on news channels. They never bring in the human aspect. Have you thought about taking this show to Washington, D.C.? Thought about, you know, putting a human face on when they're begging for money to build a bigger and tougher fence, just show the humanity aspect of what that does to our communities.
Alessandra, do you want to take the show over there?
Sure, let's drive it up there and during the Christmas break.
No. I mean, not as it was never my intention.
I know that,
So-
but looking at it now, you remove yourself from that and then you listen to the way it's spoken about, particularly right now when they're debating immigration issues. Part of that is to build more of the fence, more of a block, you know? And unless you live here, you don't, or unless you're an artist, you don't really understand what the human aspect of this is.
I guess I've been asked this before, and no, I'm not a social activist. There were personal reasons for doing this. There's very, for myself, clear intentions of what I was doing. I feel I would be compromising those intentions and the trust of the subjects, using in a context that wasn't originally part of what I wanted to do. And while I appreciate the idea of how something could be used to activate discussion, I think this is, for me, the way to do it. It's one way. And I could be wrong, too. Maybe it is the right thing to do. Maybe I should do that. At least for now, no. And frankly, there's not a political climate for it, right? So, and you can see through, Teresa's photographs, Carmela's, this thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, so.
And it's coming from Washington. Yeah. I don't think a show would make a difference. Maybe, yes, expanding that dialogue or expanding, the group of people that become in contact, that come into contact with the work and with the humanity of it.
It is very hard witnessing all the pain of these people, especially right now. Before I used to see the father in this side and wife and the daughter, kids coming to visit the father. Right now, these are the family here, the mother and all the kids visiting the father that has been deported. So that separation of the families is just so painful to see. It's hard to understand, and it's hard to think that we cannot do anything. Just in Washington, and it's very, very painful. Very painful.
Do you have a question? You raise your hand up. earlier.
Somebody, yeah. You.
I was just kind of wondering how I guess like maybe each individually or whoever wants to, but like how did your guys' purpose for your photography kind of shift? Like you guys all kind of had your way that you like began kind of like maybe taking a stroll and kind of taking pictures of the border, but then how did the purpose of taking the photos kind of evolve?
You know, after the first one, yeah, because at that point it was just, I made a picture of this guy. It's kind of an interesting picture, and I kind of had this idea. Well, let's put it on a piece of steel. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I show it to somebody, and he goes, well, we can give you some money if you want to do some more of that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, that's cool because I can get money to do my work. And then I'm working with somebody that's an installation artist. Two of them actually. They're pretty smart people. They studied at MIT, and I'm talking to them, and they're starting to get interested in things. And so I put this thing up on the wall, and I'm like, that's kind of interesting. So, and I think you can see what their work is. Things evolve, they change, yeah, from where you start to where you.
Besides taking photographs, I'm a sculptor. I'm a visual artist, interdisciplinary. Okay, photography is just one of my tools or one of my modes. Okay, but and because of that, photography for me is like this narrative that continues. Okay. Something I shot 10 years ago has a relationship with what I shot yesterday, right? I've always shown photography as an installation. 2 photos, one alongside each other, 3 photos on the floor. And it wasn't until like in 1996 when I began to cut into them, work them outside, inside the frame, and the frame had always been an obstacle for me to show my work, because most galleries wanted framed photographs, and it was like, okay, I'm not gonna go there, right? So. In the smaller pieces that you saw the work, right? In like the black and white pieces, that's when I finally grew free of this relationship that I have with photography and showing photography. I could cut into it, it didn't matter. I could these photos that created this a narrative, can be woven together, can be one in front, one in the middle, and then a little bit more of the front one in the back, in, out of the frame. So it was very liberating.
So you're getting into the symbolic aspect of it. You're talking that way, and I think of how a fence or a border is a barrier, and it seems to be characteristic to me that the United States has a lot of these obstacles or these barriers that they put up or are symbolically put up one way or another. Anytime you want to make change or do something differently, you see that things aren't working, you want to make a change, there's this barrier there or border. Somebody wants to put it up even higher.
Higher.
To me, that's what the whole installation.
It's like Hadrian, it was Hadrian, the emperor,
Hadrian.
when the Roman Empire, it was growing, and he started to have problems when he arrived in Great Britain. He couldn't win, so my wall to protect this. That's it.
Do you see the similarity between, do you see any similarities between the east and west part of Germany in relationship to what the border is here in the United States?
Well, there's walls everywhere. You have a fence probably around your yard.
Well, that's true.
Right?
I do.
I
Of
mean,
course I do.
I
Not like-
mean, in the end, we all create these spaces for ourselves, so
We do.
as to keep, what is ours, and keep those out. So I think it becomes more pronounced when it divides cultures, it divides countries, politics. And frankly, this is just one border. If you go to the Middle East, there's a whole different one. If you go to the Mediterranean Sea, the integration problem issue between North Africa and Southern Europe is just as pronounced as it is here. Probably even more so now, given what's taking place here. So,
This border and all these borders that we're talking about, they're economic filters. Economic filters. If you have money, you can go anywhere you want. You can go through you can cut through steel, you can go through any border. So it's an economic filter.
it's a pleasure to share a space with artists who are from Mexico. And I think what it reflects, there's a lot of similarities in our work. They have really, frankly, nothing to do with the actual wall itself, but just the way we see things and how we're thinking about things. And there's a continuity there, a consistency. You see a lot of depth and perspective and a sense of space. And that space is translated both emotionally and literally. But it's very different, too, with each unique sensibility to it. So I think it's a fantastic show.
And I think when I thought of this show, I thought that it was key when I was doing a show about the border to have artists from both sides, to have those two perspectives. But some people discouraged me. They said, well, people have been doing the border for a lot of time. And I said, well, you can always find people who are approaching it in a different way. Never let anybody discourage you from doing something because they tell you, oh, people have done that before. Well, just tell, well, I'll find a new way to do it. So many people, have made comments and how much they enjoy the show. So it's sometimes just taking that step and not being afraid to go ahead.
I wonder if you would say that your work is for a U.S. audience, or is it also for Mexican audience?
I think it's for anyone to see, not this or that side. Yeah.
Is your work received differently by audiences from Mexico?
From Mexico?
Yeah, from here.
It's interesting because I showed some images a couple of years ago, of photos a couple of years ago, and to a Mexican audience in Zacatecas. But in Zacatecas, there were women from all over the country. And they were blown away by the fence that goes into the ocean. It's like, they knew I was from Tijuana, they knew I was going to talk about Tijuana. And what is that? It's a fence. Oh, Tijuana. Oh yeah, it has an ocean. Fence in the ocean. I mean, and they know that there's a fence in the ocean, but you see the image and that's a fence in the ocean. It finally hit them, And this is what it looks like, one of the aspects of it. So I think anyone can be surprised, even people in the U.S. or anywhere.
My experience has been, I have another show that's at the University of Texas, Brownsville. it's primarily a lot of students from Matamoros go to school there. And it's interesting, it was really a great response, and it's been I tended to have a better response from people south of the border than north. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because when we talk about the border, it gets wrapped up in politics, it gets wrapped up in, oh, it's down there, we don't really care. As long as they've got good Mexican food, good Mexican beer, you go to Puerto Vallarta or Cancun. I don't know. It's,
It's just taboo.
no, I don't know, because, I taught a class on the history of Latin American photography. There's been important shows dealing with the history of Latin American photography. That history is really strong in Mexico. You've got Tino Modati, you've got Manuel Alvarez Bravo. These are really important artists in the history of art, let alone photography. There's been shows where photographers from Europe, Asia, and the United States photograph things. They just don't get the kind of attention that you would think they would. They get the attention in Mexico, but not here. So I don't. Maybe it's people get tired of it, hearing it. It's on the news so much, and what you hear is always negative for the most part. It's always wrapped up in some kind of negativity. I don't know. Maybe that'll change. Maybe there's going to be more of an openness, especially if the talk of immigration reform. You thought with NAFTA, and more economic exchange, that could really transpire the way it thought it was.